Welcome back to the His Glassworks Cold Shop. In our previous video, we spoke about the different types of abrasives you can use in cold working. And if you haven't seen that video yet, I highly recommend you go through that so you'll get a better understanding of how abrasives work, so you'll know which one to choose for your processes. When it comes to diamonds as an abrasive, you can generally break it down into two main formats: natural diamonds and synthetic diamonds. Natural diamonds are exactly what they seem to be: diamonds that are mined from the earth that occur naturally due to eons of pressure and heat. Most of the diamonds in the world are going to be natural diamonds. When it comes to natural diamonds, those can be broken down into industrial diamonds, which is what will be used in our cold working tools, and then diamonds that you'll see in jewelry. The majority of diamonds in the world are actually industrial diamonds. They're a little kind of grayish, blackish, brownish colored, so they're not all that pretty to make jewelry out of, but they work great for grinding and polishing. So in natural diamonds, if you take a closer look at those, you can see that this is a natural diamond. It's sort of grayish, blackish mixture there, but you can see it's got a light coloration to it. And that's a pretty typical look for a natural diamond. Now, synthetic diamonds are, again, exactly what they say they are. They are lab-grown diamonds, where they are specifically made by generating heat and pressure in a shorter amount of time to generate a very specific type of diamond. Now, synthetic diamonds are pretty easy to recognize as well. As you'll see from this pile, the synthetic diamonds have kind of this golden color to them. They're very, very different from what you would see from a natural diamond. So you can very easily tell the difference between a natural diamond and a synthetic diamond. So you may be asking yourself, so what's the difference between a natural diamond and a synthetic diamond besides the color? That's a good question. Synthetic diamonds are generally made for specific purposes. So for something like a resin-bonded diamond, those are all going to be a synthetic diamond because they're grown in a lab specifically to bond to resins. So they'll hold in longer and perform better. A natural diamond will actually break out of a resin bond much faster than a synthetic diamond will. Natural diamonds are also going to break a little differently than a synthetic diamond. A natural diamond, when it breaks off, is going to leave a sharper edge. It's a little more random in the way it breaks. A synthetic diamond, on the other hand, when it breaks, is going to leave a bit of a flatter surface. It's almost like it tabletops when it breaks. So it's a little less random. So the diamond life on a synthetic diamond can sometimes be significantly shorter. We'll talk about why that's not such a big deal in resin-bonded diamonds and other situations in a moment, but those kind of cover the biggest differences between a natural diamond and a synthetic diamond. So what's the real difference between a synthetic diamond and a natural diamond when it comes to your diamond tools? Why choose one over the other? As I've already discussed, synthetic diamonds can be engineered to do specific things, whereas a natural diamond cannot. So let's take our most common tools that we offer, our electroplated and resin diamond discs. So in our electroplated diamond disc, this is used with a natural diamond. It's electroplated onto a copper substrate with nickel, so it holds the diamond in place. Natural diamonds work really well in this situation for electroplated discs because as they break, they will still leave sharp edges. So as this disc wears down, it will still remove material from your glass very efficiently. If we were to use a synthetic diamond in this disc, since the diamonds are locked into a single orientation with that nickel, as those diamonds broke, they would no longer be as effective because they would leave a flatter surface on top of the diamond rather than a sharper surface. So natural diamonds work really well in a situation where your diamonds are locked into place in a single orientation, like our electroplated diamond discs, where it's nickel that is holding this diamond in place. Conversely, with our resin diamond pads, our diamonds are mixed into a resin that's then coated onto an optical felt substrate. Now, these are going to be synthetic diamonds that are grown specifically to bond well to resins. So as you use it, you won't be knocking the diamonds out of the resin as quickly as if we were to use a natural diamond with this. So these pads will last longer. If it was a natural diamond, they would wear very, very quickly because they would release from the resin much faster than an engineered synthetic diamond does. Well, hold on a minute, you say. When I said synthetic diamonds break and they leave a flat surface, why would I want to use them in a resin bonded pad? Well, unlike our electroplated diamond discs, where the diamonds are locked into place in a single orientation on the surface of the pad, the resin is a softer substrate. So as the diamonds hit the glass, they will actually move slightly within the resin. So imagine grass blowing in the breeze, and you'll get a good idea of how the diamonds move on the surface of a resin diamond pad. So as your glass comes along and hits the diamond, it shifts out of the way. As those diamonds break in a resin pad, they're still going to shift a little bit to the left and the right as your glass hits it. So you're always going to be hitting a sharper edge of that diamond because it's not locked into a single orientation. That's what makes these pads very, very effective. So are electroplated and resin diamonds the only type of diamond tools out there? No, actually they're not. Electroplated diamonds are definitely the most common that you're going to find, be it a flat lap or something like this electroplated diamond wheel. Again, you have diamonds that are electroplated with nickel onto the surface of a wheel, locked into place. So they're going to give you a very aggressive grind on your glass. But this is not the only option for diamond tools. You also have what's called sintered diamond, and that's Sintered. Sintered diamond is going to take your diamonds, be it natural or synthetic, they can be used both in a sintered diamond, mixing it with a softer metal matrix that is then compressed onto a tool with heat and pressure. So a sintered diamond tool, like this diamond wheel here, you may be able to see there's diamond all the way through this wheel. So there's probably about 3/4 of an inch worth of diamond on this wheel, compared to something like this electroplated diamond wheel where you only have this single layer of diamond on here. So these become much longer lasting wheels, but they also have other advantages over an electroplated wheel. Remember, with our electroplated diamonds, the diamond is locked into place with nickel. So you have this single layer of a single orientation of diamond. So the diamonds are really quite high in that nickel matrix. When you grind your glass, it's going to give you a very, very aggressive grind on the glass because all the points of the diamond are sticking up out of the nickel. So you get this really aggressive grind on the glass that will slowly begin to break down and get duller and duller as you use this single layer of diamond on here. With this sintered diamond tool, as we mentioned, there's diamond all the way through here. And this metal matrix where the diamond is mixed in is a little softer than this nickel based. So the diamonds will move slightly in this metal matrix, a little bit softer. And they're a little bit deeper into that metal, whereas the diamonds with the nickel are raised up. The ones in a sintered diamond are actually a little bit further down into the metal matrix. So you're getting a little bit of a softer grind with the same grit level. You'll still get that high removal rate that is comparable to an electroplated wheel, but you're going to get a much softer surface on the glass and something that's going to last a tremendously long time, because as this wears down, old diamonds will fall out of this metal matrix and expose brand new diamonds underneath it until you've gone all the way through, which honestly would be both of our lifetimes together. So we've talked about electroplated diamonds, resin diamonds, sintered diamonds, and how they actually will traverse different tools. So it's not just flat laps or wheels. When you look at your saw blades are going to be lots of different versions. You'll find electroplated saw blades, sintered diamond saw blades, resin diamond saw blades. The most common, of course, is the sintered diamond saw blades, and you're probably very familiar with what these look like. You've got this sort of yellowish brown bronzy rim around your diamond saw blade, and you now know from looking at these wheels, this is a sintered diamond saw blade, which means there's diamond all the way through the metal matrix of this rim. This makes saw blades very long lasting. As they wear down, the diamonds will shed off of here and expose new diamonds, so the saw blade just keeps going and going. Core drills are the same thing. Core drills will be electroplated or sintered. If you have a sintered core drill, it's generally going to have this sort of bronzy color that you see in the sintered diamonds. That's going to be a much longer lasting core drill. This is a resin diamond blade. So as we know, if the diamond is mixed into a resin, it's going to move around a little bit more than it does if it's locked into place in a metal, be it electroplated or sintered. So this blade will actually give you a very fine cut on your glass, but it's going to be a lot slower because the diamonds are not locked into place. Resin is also very fragile, so you have to be very, very careful with these blades, but they will give you an excellent cut on your glass when you use them. The same thing goes for belts. You can have electroplated diamond belts. You can have resin diamond belts. You're not going to see a sintered diamond belt, unfortunately, because it's just not feasible physically to create that. But you will notice when you start working with a lot of rougher grit electroplated diamonds, there's going to be a little dot pattern to a lot of these things, be it the belts or something like one of these handy pads. This is basically there to allow the swarf or the ground glass that you create to move through this material and around it instead of clogging up the diamonds. That can happen with a lot of the diamond tools. So you'll often need to make sure that you clean them out, wash them off, keep all that ground glass out of your diamonds to make sure that the diamonds are still working as optimally as possible. So you may be saying, well, are these the only options in diamonds? You've got electroplated, you've got sintered, you've got resin. What else is out there? Well, diamonds are extremely versatile. You can use them in a paste to do hand lapping, that is often used. There's also a product from 3M called Electrostatic diamonds, where they'll take diamonds and adhere it to a paperback surface with an adhesive, and then they'll electrostatically charge the environment as the adhesive cures. What this does is it creates an environment where all the diamonds will stand up on the surface of this pad. But since they're locked into a very soft adhesive, somewhat like our resin diamond tools, you'll also get that effect where the diamonds are kind of flowing back and forth as you grind with them. So they give you an extremely fine surface on the glass that's easy to achieve because the diamonds are a very aggressive media. So what's the big takeaway from diamond abrasives? The easiest things to remember are electroplated diamonds are going to be very aggressive on the surface of your glass. There's only going to be a single layer of them, so as they wear down, that's it. The tool is finished. You're not going to get another layer of diamond underneath that. With resin-based diamond tools, you have a single layer of diamond on there trapped into a resin, so it's in a softer matrix than if it were electroplated with nickel. That means it's going to move around a little bit more and give you a softer grind on the glass with less removal. Sintered diamonds, where they're mixed into a metal matrix, like this wheel or your saw blades, are going to give you an aggressive grind on the glass, but a fine surface appearance. So you kind of get the best of both worlds between electroplated and resin. Now, sintered diamond tools are going to be a lot more expensive, but in the long run, they will give you faster, better surfaces than electroplated or resin tools typically will. So we've done a quick overview of diamonds as an abrasive, how they're used, what types there are, and I know it can get really confusing, and we haven't even touched on grit size yet, which is a huge component in how you grind and polish your glass. So we're going to do another video soon that's going to cover grits from rough to fine, when to use which one, and the differences between them depending on the type of abrasive you're using, so you get a better idea of how that progression works in your cold working.